The day my husband's first love became a widow, he asked me for a divorce. With our daughter's unwavering support, this silver-hair man directly turned away from me and married his first love. Their wedding photos, brimming with happiness, became a viral sensation. When they posted them online, the whole internet world was captivated by their love story. And that was when I walked into their wedding banquet. He staggered toward me, his steps unsteady, yet his grip on his first love's hand remained firm. His voice trembled as he said, "Cynthia, don't ruin my wedding. Let's part on good terms." I smiled. "I'm not here to cause trouble. I'm here to give you both a grand gift." Not long ago, my husband Albert suddenly asked for a divorce. I was stunned. He was 70 years old. What could have possibly made him think this way? Albert didn't bother sugarcoating it. "Kristen's husband passed away. She needs me now. I want to spend the rest of my life with her." My first reaction was shock and heartbreak. But then, almost instinctively, I started questioning myself. Had I done something wrong? Was this just another one of his tantrums? Surely this old man was just being difficult again. Otherwise, how could he come up with something so outrageous? But no matter what I said or did, his mind was made up. He was determined to leave me. It all happened so suddenly, so quickly. Just 2 weeks ago, he was still sitting at home, glasses perched on his nose, reading the newspaper while waiting for me to bring him his meal. And now he was someone else's husband. I swept my gaze calmly across the room. The venue was packed. Albert's students, old friends, and Kristen's devoted readers and admirers filled the space. Among them, someone stood clutching a large bouquet of fresh flowers, preparing to present them to the happy couple. That someone was my daughter, Lisa. The moment she spotted me, she hurriedly shoved the bouquet into the hands of the person next to her and pushed through the crowd to reach us. Her voice carried a trace of frustration as she said, "Mom, what are you doing here? Today is Dad's big day. If you're here to make a scene, don't blame me for getting upset and ask you out. Dad and Aunt Kristen were forced apart for nearly 40 years because of you. Haven't you had him long enough?" "Because of me?" I instinctively questioned. "What kind of person do you think I am?" Lisa's clear, unwavering gaze landed on me, her tone indifferent as she said, "Dad is a scholar and expert. His students are spread all across the country. He's a man of influence. And you're nothing more than an uneducated housewife." Kristen gently tugged at Lisa's hand. "You shouldn't talk to your mother like that," she said. "A housewife who raised you and cared for your father all these years. She's had a hard life too." Lisa's expression softened slightly at Kristen's words. With a sigh, she muttered, "Sure, Kristen, if you say so." Then she turned back to me, still impatient but noticeably more restrained. "Mom, you shouldn't be here. This is Dad and Aunt Kristen's wedding. You don't belong here." She was eager to get rid of me, shutting me out before I could even get a word in. The next thing I knew, I was being ushered out of the hotel's grand entrance. As if worried I might turn around and come back, Lisa quickly added, "Mom, Barry will be getting out of school soon and there's no one home. Why don't you pick him up and take him to the playground?" The mention of my grandson, sweet little Barry, made me pause. I took a deep breath, forcing down the simmering rage inside me. For now, I would let it go. I turned around, exhaling deeply, and decided to go pick up Barry. Just then, a group of young people came rushing toward the hotel. In their haste, they accidentally knocked me over. One of them quickly helped me up, apologizing breathlessly. "Sorry, ma'am, we're in a hurry for the wedding." From a few steps ahead, his companion called out impatiently, waving excitedly. "Hurry up. Professor Albert and Ms. Kristen's wedding has already started. Stop wasting time talking to that lady. We're already late." I watched as they disappeared inside, their energy buzzing with excitement. The dazzling glow of the crystal chandeliers inside the wedding hall made my head spin. On the massive projection screen, their wedding photo shone brilliantly, the hashtag love knows no fear emblazoned beneath it. It felt like a slap to the face. I let out a bitter chuckle. In everyone's eyes, I was never a match for Albert. I was never good enough. But once upon a time, I was the one who should have had the chance to go to school. My father had taken every last penny of our savings and paid for the tuition of his best friend's orphan son, Albert. And to make that happen, I was forced to drop out. That night, I overheard my mother crying, trying to suppress her sobs as she told my father, "You should have let Cynthia go to college. If you don't, she'll end up just like me." My father only responded by silently puffing on his cigarette. But I hadn't been angry. Not even then. Instead, I had been happy for Albert. I had rushed to him, bursting with excitement, and said, "You can go to school now. And when you come home, you can teach me everything you learn in college, okay?" The first time Albert left for school, he kept looking back with every few steps as if burdened with guilt. But I had only found him annoyingly hesitant. Back in the countryside, I worked even harder alongside my parents, hoping that by autumn, we could sell more produce so I could buy Albert a gift. That winter, Albert had once held my hand and made a promise. "Cynthia, don't worry. Once I graduate and land a good job, I'll bring you to live with me. We'll have a good life together." But now he looked down on me for my lack of education, saying we had nothing in common. More than once he had told me, "Cynthia, why don't you read a book when you have time? Learn something. Otherwise, I'll be embarrassed to admit to my students that my wife is really lack of education and not knowing well." Every time he said that, I couldn't help but think, at my age with a household full of responsibilities, where was I supposed to find the time to sit and read? And whenever I refused, he would grow impatient, toss his newspaper aside and walk out the door, muttering Kristen's name as he went. "I'm going over to Kristen's for tea. Maybe I'll play a round of chess with Frank while I'm there." Now I finally understood. It was never about playing chess with Kristen's husband, Frank. It was about seeing the woman he had always considered his perfect wife. Lost in thought, I stopped in my tracks and looked up. I had already arrived at the kindergarten. The playground was empty, all the other children had been picked up. Through the classroom window I saw Barry still inside. His teacher let out a relieved sigh upon seeing me. I couldn't get in touch with Barry's mom. "I'm so glad you came. Barry, your grandma's here to pick you up." I quickly took Barry's small hand, thanked the teacher, and led him outside toward the bus stop. Barry tilted his head up at me, his voice sweet and expectant. "Grandma, where are we going?" I smiled. "How about the playground?" His little mouth immediately formed a pout. "I don't want to go. I want to go to Grandpa's wedding." I was stunned. Even Barry knew about their wedding? How exactly had they explained it to a child? Did they tell him that his 70-year-old grandfather still couldn't let go of his first love, so he had decided to turn back and reunite with her after all these years? My mind was a tangled mess, but Barry tugged at my hand, swinging it back and forth. "Grandma, please take me. Pretty please." His bright eyes were filled with anticipation. "I heard my new grandma is Kristen. A lot of my classmates really like her. Now I can tell everyone that my grandma is a famous writer. Maybe then they'll stop making fun of me." I crouched down, taking his little backpack from his shoulders, and gave him a gentle smile. At that moment I made up my mind. "All right," I said. "Let's go to your grandpa's wedding." On the way, Barry kept chattering, his little voice filled with questions. "Grandma, does this mean you won't live with us anymore?" He paused, then added, "The other day I heard Mom and Grandpa talking about sending you back to the countryside." A sharp pain tightened in my chest. But I still forced a smile. "Do you want Grandma to go back to the countryside?" Barry's small face scrunched up in hesitation. After a moment of deep thought, he said, "If you leave, I won't get to eat your chocolate cake anymore. But, if people find out my new grandma is Kristen, they'll be so jealous of me." He kept mumbling to himself, weighing the pros and cons of his little dilemma, completely absorbed in his own thoughts. I couldn't help but chuckle, both amused and exasperated. At least Barry was honest about his feelings. Unlike his mother and grandfather, who hid behind their masks of righteousness. One was chasing after his so-called true love, while the other wanted a stepmother to boost her social standing. And yet they both placed the blame squarely on me. "This is all your fault. If you had just educated yourself more, we wouldn't have ended up like this." Albert's words before he walked out of our home for the last time still echoed in my mind. Lisa wholeheartedly agreed with him. "Mom, don't take it too hard. Dad and Aunt Kristen are a perfect match. And let's be honest, you're just a housewife. You've had so many good years with Dad. Shouldn't you be grateful?" Now even a child understood that they wanted me gone. Instead I screamed, "Dad, if you knew that the son you sacrificed so much for turned out to be an ungrateful man, would you regret it?" I still remembered the day Albert proposed to me after graduating from college. I had been hesitant, nervous. "You're brilliant, with a bright future ahead of you. How could I possibly be good enough for you? Don't marry me just because you feel indebted to my father. Neither he nor I would ever want to force you into that." But Albert had looked at me with complete sincerity. This isn't about repaying any favor. I just feel like we're a perfect fit. We'll be happy together. It had been such a simple, earnest confession. And I had believed him. I had believed every word. Back then, I thought love was about companionship, about building a life together, about trust. I never imagined that decades later, I'd be discarded like an old, outdated book. One he was embarrassed to be seen with. Now he stood beside Kristen, hand in hand, basking in the admiration of the crowd. The same man who once promised to build a future with me had rewritten our story, erasing me from its pages as if I had never mattered. I still remembered the night before my wedding. My father sat outside my door until dawn. The next morning when I opened it, I found a pile of cigarette butts at his feet. He looked up at me, his voice steady yet heavy. "Don't worry, Cynthia. If Albert ever mistreats you, I'll stand up for you." But my father died 5 years later before he ever had the chance to keep that promise. With no one left to protect me, Albert never had to hold back. And Albert, he was the closest person to me in this world. By the time I arrived at the hotel, the banquet was still in full swing. Albert and Kristen, glowing as newlyweds, stood at the center of the room, receiving blessings from their guests. Barry, the moment he spotted Albert, ran toward him with uncontainable excitement. "Grandpa, you look so handsome today." His childish voice rang through the hall, drawing a wave of laughter from the guests. Even Barry knew this was a joyful occasion. But no one in that room knew that the suit Albert was wearing, the one that made him look so dignified and polished, was sewn by my own hands. No one knew that inside the cuff, there was a single stray thread of blue stitching, stitched by me. He had once called it his lucky charm. And yet today he had pulled it from the depths of his closet, put it on, and married someone else. Kristen turned to me with a gentle smile. "Cynthia, come have a seat. Albert mentioned you'd be moving back to the countryside. What are your plans after that?" Before I could answer, murmurs began to ripple through the guests around us. Why is she here? A woman this ordinary, with no talent or accomplishments, actually managed to marry someone like Professor Albert? She must have had some nerve to pull that off. Right? And now that he's divorcing her, how could she possibly accept it so easily? But let's be honest, she was never a match for him to begin with. Just because their fathers were friends doesn't mean she had the right to hold on to him forever. Their words cut through me like 1,000 tiny blades. Memories flooded back, the ones I had long buried. Like how, despite years of marriage, Albert never once allowed me to visit his workplace. Not even to bring him food, clothes, or important documents. Whenever I had no choice but to drop something off, he insisted I leave it with the security guard, claiming I was just the housekeeper. Or the time I had timidly asked him to recommend some books for me. His response had been cold and dismissive. "Do you even have the ability to read them? Stop wasting time. If you have time for books, you should be in the kitchen. We're hungry." To him, I was never worthy of knowledge. Because if I learned to read, if I broadened my mind, he wouldn't have an excuse to belittle me anymore. And without that excuse, how could he justify leaving me? How could he justify running back to his precious first love? "Mom, what are you zoning out for? Everyone's watching." Lisa's voice snapped me out of my thoughts. She let out an exasperated sigh. "Just leave already. Here, take $100, grab a cab and go home. Don't make a scene. I'll come back after the wedding and have dinner with you, okay?" She pulled out the cash, ready to shove it into my hand. For years, I had been nothing but a housewife with no income of my own. And yet, they meticulously controlled every penny of my allowance, making sure I never had enough to save anything for myself. Every expense had to be accounted for. Even when I fell ill, I had to request money for a doctor's visit. But now she was eager to throw cash at me, desperate to make me leave. How ironic. I stared at the bills in her hand and refused to take them. Lisa hesitated, confused by my reaction. "Is it not enough?" she asked. "Fine. 300. No, 500. Will that do?" Before she could finish, I slapped her across the face. The crisp sound echoed through the hall. Lisa froze, too stunned to react. The entire room went silent as curious onlookers craned their necks to watch the spectacle unfold. I looked her dead in the eyes. "Who do you think you're talking to?" My voice was cold. "You're bribing your own mother to leave, just so your father can marry his mistress in peace? You're just as ungrateful as he is." Lisa stood there, stunned, her cheek burning red. Albert and Kristen quickly stepped in, trying to smooth over the tension. Albert sighed, his tone heavy with forced patience. Cynthia, calm down. This is my wedding. He paused before adding, fine. I admit your father helped me. Without him I wouldn't have gone to college. Hell, I might have starved to death. But I've repaid that debt over the years. I never mistreated you. Kristen chimed in, her voice gentle as if trying to pacify me. I know this must be hard for you, Cynthia. But I'm not trying to erase the past. I accept that you and Albert had a long history together. Albert turned back to me, his expression weary. So why are you still clinging to the past? Why can't you just let go? I let out a short, cold laugh. Half of what you said is true, I said evenly. You didn't mistreat me. After all, I didn't starve to death under your roof. But while you were off securing research grants, most of that money went straight to Kristen and her family. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. I continued, my voice unwavering. And after I gave birth to Lisa, you stopped sharing a bed with me. No, you stopped sharing a room altogether. You told me you needed a quiet space to focus on your research. That you didn't want to disturb me or Lisa's sleep. Even when Lisa was away, you refused to come near me. I met his gaze and tilted my head. Now I finally understand why. The murmur in the crowd grew louder. You weren't preserving your academic focus. You were preserving yourself for Kristen. A stunned silence fell over the room before the whispers erupted again. Oh my God, is she serious? I thought Professor Albert was forced into his first marriage. But now, even if he didn't love her, he was married to her. To treat her like that. Silent treatment for decades? That's just cruel. Albert's face darkened. His hands clenched at his sides as he shook his head. This is humiliating, he muttered. How could you say something like that in front of all these people? I raised an eyebrow. Oh, now you care about your dignity? I took a step closer, my voice sharp and unwavering. You've had decades of dignity, Albert. Where was that dignity when you were sneaking behind Frank's back? When you and Kristen were running around behind her husband's back, keeping your little affair alive? The moment the words left my mouth, the entire banquet hall erupted. Gasps, whispers, scandalized murmurs. Albert's hand shot up, his finger nearly jabbing at my face. His whole body trembled with rage. You foolish woman. Do you have no shame? He snarled. Saying such things in public. I cut him off. Yes, I am foolish. I smiled, slow and deliberate. But at least I know the difference between right and wrong. My eyes flicked between him and Kristen. Unlike you two. Albert was practically shaking now, his face red with fury. And for the first time in years I felt light. Decades ago, on a quiet evening, my father brought home a boy. He told us that the child was the son of a dear friend. A friend who had once saved his life. I can't just leave him to fend for himself, he said. From that night on, Albert lived in our home. My mother was a simple and kind-hearted woman, never one to question my father's decisions. She only knew how to follow his lead. But our small town was filled with gossipers and rumors spread like wildfire. Are you sure that boy isn't your husband's bastard child? Maybe you're raising the child of his mistress. Whenever my mother heard these whispers, she would storm to the door, hands on her hips, ready to fight anyone who dared to spread such filth. Which one of you cowards is running your mouth? My man is nothing like that. Go home and watch over your husbands before they start cheating. She was fierce and unrelenting. But the moment she turned back to Albert, her expression softened. She would smile and say, Don't worry, sweetheart. As long as I'm here, no one will dare bully you. And I, just like my mother, fought tooth and nail for Albert. Anyone who so much as mentioned his name in a bad light would find themselves at the mercy of my fists. Even the biggest boys in town knew not to cross me. Say one more word about Albert and I'll smash your skull in with a rock. Back then, I never imagined that one day things would end like this. That after all those years of standing by his side, I would come to realize that I had wasted my entire life on a fraud. Albert's voice snapped me back to the present, his face as cold as ice. I've already told you, I'm spending the rest of my life with Kristen. No matter how much of a scene you make, it won't change anything. Instead of embarrassing yourself, why not hold on to what little dignity you have left? I spat at his feet. I don't care who you spend your life with, I said. I never said you couldn't move on. But our divorce isn't finalized yet and you've already rushed to throw yourself a wedding. My voice dripped with mockery. Tell me, who here is the one without dignity? I took a step forward, staring him down. You want a divorce? Fine. But I will not accept your terms. My voice grew sharper. I gave everything, to this marriage. And now you want to toss me aside with nothing? Do you think I'm too stupid, too uneducated to know how unfair that is? Kristen let out a low, contemptuous laugh, her eyes brimming with condescension. Cynthia, she sneered, we're not asking you to leave with nothing. It's just that, well, maintaining a household for all these years has been expensive and there isn't much left. But don't worry, when you move back to the countryside, Albert will still send you a living allowance. And I'll even help cover the costs to renovate your old house. Her words sent a ripple through the crowd. The murmurs turned into open disdain. Oh, so that's what this is about. She just wants money. Figures. I knew she wouldn't let go so easily. What a schemer. What a disgrace. Clinging on to him for dear life even after he's moved on. I let out a cold, bitter laugh. I thought I was standing in a room full of intellectuals, I said slowly, my voice dripping with irony. But it turns out you're just as ignorant as they are. My gaze swept across the crowd. You're no different from these two ungrateful, self-righteous hypocrites. I laughed again, softly this time. Then I turned back to Kristen and Albert, my smile razor sharp. You want to play it this way? Fine. I tilted my chin up. I'll see you in court. I may be 70 years old, but at least I've lived long enough to finally see things clearly. If nothing else, I can say I've truly understood life before it ended. I didn't argue with them anymore. I simply turned and went home. While they were still busy celebrating, I packed my belongings. That's when I realized I had almost nothing to take with me. A single suitcase barely half full. When I was done, I dragged it to the front door only to run into them just as they returned. Lisa was the first to speak. Mom, you can stay at the house for a while if you want. We're leaving for a short trip anyway. Her tone was casual, as if we hadn't just stood on opposite sides of a battlefield. Kristen's new book launch was happening in the next city over, and apparently they all wanted to make a trip out of it. I had never expected my daughter to be so close to Kristen. I let out a soft laugh and shook my head. Well, I hope you all have a wonderful trip. I wasn't angry. I didn't argue. That seemed to unsettle them more than anything else. Albert cleared his throat, his voice careful. Cynthia, I know you're a reasonable person. Just don't do anything foolish, all right? Even Lisa, who had always treated me with thinly veiled contempt, looked somewhat uneasy. Where are you going? She asked. I'll drive you. Lisa had never offered to drive me anywhere. Even when I'd asked for a ride to the market, she would always refuse, too embarrassed to let anyone see her scholar father's illiterate wife. And yet today she was suddenly volunteering to take me somewhere. Guilt maybe? I looked at her, my expression unreadable. That won't be necessary, I said evenly. You should stay here and bond with your new mother. After all, you'll need her influence if you want to keep climbing that social ladder. My words carried the sharp edge of sarcasm. Lisa's lips parted slightly as if she wanted to say something, but I didn't wait to hear it. I turned away without a second glance and walked out of that house. That night I saw Lisa's latest post online, a family portrait. In the photo, Lisa leaned in close to Kristen, their faces pressed together like mother and daughter. If Kristen had ever had a biological daughter, she wouldn't have looked any different. But Kristen couldn't have children. She had fallen gravely ill when she was younger, and the illness had left her infertile. Frank, however, had adored her, cherishing her even more after her sickness. He had loved her fiercely, devotedly, never wavering. And yet, even as I thought of Frank's unwavering love, all I could feel was pity for him. Because if Kristen had never given Albert any hope, he wouldn't have proposed to her the moment Frank was gone. The truth was obvious. Those two had been involved long before Frank ever passed. I contacted a lawyer to draft a new divorce agreement. After listening to my story, he was furious. Ma'am, in your situation, we must expose him as the at-fault party in this marriage. Otherwise, if he argues in court that he supported you all these years, it could put you at a disadvantage when it comes to dividing assets. With his guidance, I recorded a short video and uploaded it to social media. In the video I laid everything out, the decades I had spent with Albert, the sacrifices I had made, and how I was being discarded like an old, useless object. I don't want him back. I just want what I'm owed. That last line was something my lawyer insisted I add. At first I was worried. After all, at the wedding, plenty of guests had already called me shameless for daring to show up. Surely the internet would tear me apart even worse. But to my surprise, the reaction was nothing like I expected. Wait. Isn't this the woman from that high-profile wedding? The OG wife. Grandma, you did the right thing. You have to fight for your rights. You sacrificed everything for him and now he wants to toss you aside with nothing? Hell no. The comments poured in and with them the tides shifted. It's not even about money. She gave up her education for him, dedicated her entire life to being a housewife, and now he wants to send her to the countryside with nothing? That's just evil. As the video gained traction, my phone rang. Albert. I answered, already knowing what he was going to say. Cynthia. His voice was tense, his tone rushed. You want money? Fine. I'll give it to you. Just stop encouraging people to attack Kristen. Do you even know? She's been crying so much her eyes are swollen. In the background I heard Barry's small voice choked with sobs. Grandma's bad. Grandma only wants money. Grandma is bad. If this had been before, those words would have broken me. But now I just smiled. Calmly I said into the phone, I've had my lawyer draft a new divorce agreement. Sign it and once we're officially divorced I won't bring this up again. Albert was silent for a long moment. Then finally he exhaled. Fine. And with that he hung up. Just when I thought this ordeal was finally coming to an end, Lisa made a post on social media. My mother has been a housewife all her life, but she has a domineering personality. My father and I lived under immense pressure because of her. In her video she kept hinting that my father cheated. But let me ask, how could he have possibly cheated? He's 70 years old. He spent his entire life trapped in a hopeless marriage. Only when he felt that his days were numbered did he finally work up the courage to ask for a divorce. And just then Aunt Kristen became a widow. Two lovers from their youth, finally reunited in their twilight years. What's so wrong about that? Her words stirred up a whole new wave of discussion. This time it wasn't just about me. Men who felt powerless in their marriages flocked to Albert's defense. I get where Albert's coming from. A wife that's too domineering? That's suffocating. After working all day, all a man wants is peace at home. If your wife is too strong-willed, life becomes unbearable. Kristen seems so gentle. Honestly, she and Albert are a much better match. And just like that, the tides turned against me once again. They branded me an overbearing old woman making a fuss over nothing. Not a single one of them cared about the truth. Lisa even sent me a message taunting me. I told you, didn't I? Stop fighting. Just go back to the countryside and live out the rest of your days in peace. With Lisa publicly defending Albert, he saw his chance to backpedal. The man who had once been so eager to settle things was now avoiding me. My lawyer couldn't reach him. Calls went unanswered. Fury burned in my lawyer's voice. Ma'am, your daughter, she's something else. Does she not realize what you've been through? You gave your whole life to this family and this is how they repay you? Don't worry. I will win this case for you. Meanwhile, as public opinion turned in their favor, Kristen made a grand show of her victory. At a book signing she made a veiled remark, one clearly aimed at me. A woman, no matter her age, is always a rose meant to be cherished. And if she isn't loved, well, perhaps she was never a rose worth loving to begin with. The crowd applauded her poetic sentiment, oblivious to the venom laced within it. I let out a cold laugh. She really thought she had won. Just when everyone thought I was bound to lose this battle, I found someone willing to testify on my behalf. Frank's nephew, Patrick. Frank had never had a biological child, but he had always loved children. He had poured all his affection into his nephew. And in the end, when he took his final breath, Kristen wasn't even by his side. She had been away and Patrick had been the one to stay by his bedside to send him off. Patrick recorded a video for me. Hello everyone. My name is Patrick Wilson. I am in name Kristen's nephew, but in reality my uncle was Frank Wilson, Kristen's husband. Or should I say ex-husband now, since she wasted no time marrying someone else after his death. Since I was young I've had a passion for photography. My uncle supported my hobby, he even bought me my very first camera. And with that camera I captured something I wished I had never seen. Kristen. With other men. For years I struggled with what to do. Should I tell my uncle? Should I break his heart? But before I could decide, he was gone. And I can't help but wonder, was Kristen to blame? She had been emotionally distant for years, and my uncle had been growing more and more despondent. And Kristen, she never even tried to hide her affairs. These photos may be decades old, but they're clear enough to show the truth. And among those men was Albert. Even I didn't expect that they had been entangled for so long. The video ended. I called Patrick, thanking him over and over again. On the other end of the line, he was silent for a long time before finally sighing. "Ma'am, you and my uncle are alike. You're both good people. And I refuse to let you suffer like he did. Some people may grow old, but their character remains rotten. People like that don't deserve our respect." The moment I hung up, Lisa's message popped up. "You froze all the family assets. How are we supposed to live now?" Right after Albert called. His voice was agitated. "Cynthia, how could you really go through with suing me? Do you want to ruin my reputation?" I didn't bother entertaining him. Patrick's video had ignited a storm. Public opinion flipped once again. My lawyer released an official statement. Mrs. Cynthia has formally filed for divorce. The only dispute remains the division of assets. My client dedicated her life to this family, only to be betrayed in her later years and left with nothing. This is simply unjust. As her attorney, I will ensure that her legal rights are protected and will take legal action against those spreading false accusations against her. More and more people started speaking up. Former neighbors, Albert's colleagues, even a young woman who had once been Kristen's devoted fan. I used to admire Kristen so much. But after learning the truth, I can't believe I ever saw her as an inspiration. That one simple sentence carried an enormous weight. Kristen's books were pulled from shelves. Several publishing houses publicly severed ties with her, issuing statements condemning her actions. Integrity matters as much as talent. We value literature, but we value morality just as much. Both are indispensable. Then one evening there was a knock at my door. I opened it to find Albert and Kristen standing there. Kristen's knees buckled the moment she saw me, and she nearly threw herself to the ground. "Cynthia, please, I can't take this anymore. I'm begging you, let us go, let this go." Albert stood beside her, his face flushed red with humiliation. For a long time he said nothing. Then in a low voice he finally muttered, "If you leave Kristen alone, I'll come back. We can go back to the way things were." I stared at him for a moment before letting out a short laugh. "You really think too highly of yourself, don't you?" His eyes flickered. "You actually believe I'm doing all this just to get you back?" I smirked. "Albert, the day you asked for a divorce was the day I stopped considering you my husband. I'm not trying to win you back. I'm simply taking back what I deserve, for myself and for my parents who gave up so much for you." Albert's face darkened further. Kristen was still kneeling, quietly sobbing. I lifted my foot and lightly nudged her. Caught off guard, she stumbled to the side, looking up at me in shock. After all, despite the way they had slandered me, claiming I was aggressive and domineering, I had never once laid a hand on any of them. I had endured everything they threw at me without ever retaliating. But now I was done enduring. I looked down at Kristen and smiled. "Enough with the act. We both know you don't mean a single word of that apology." Her breath hitched. He knew it too. At this point, staying with Albert was her only option. Without him, she had nothing, not even someone to care for her in old age. And Albert? I knew him too well. He was already planning his next move. Sure enough, he cleared his throat and tried again, his voice softer this time. "Cynthia, I really do regret everything. Let's just put this behind us, okay?" At that moment, Lisa's name popped up on my phone. "Mom, Dad and Kristen went to see you. Are you guys talking? Dad says they're there to apologize to you." I typed back. "Yes, your parents are here. Your mom is crying." Lisa responded almost immediately. "What? My mom isn't you? You're not crying." I stared at the message for a second before chuckling coldly. They really were shameless. Without hesitation, I blocked Lisa's number. This mother-daughter relationship had come to its end. Half an hour after Albert and Kristen left, my lawyer called. "Albert has agreed to sign the divorce papers," he informed me. I wasn't surprised. Albert had spent his whole life obsessed with his reputation. There was no way he would drag himself to court over a divorce in his 70s, especially not against a woman who had once been his benefactor's daughter. He couldn't afford that kind of humiliation. The settlement was simple. The house would remain his, and aside from the cash in our accounts, he would compensate me with an additional $300,000. It wasn't a fortune, but I knew it was all he could give. With that money, I bought a piece of land in the countryside and built a farmhouse restaurant. I grew my own vegetables, raised chickens and ducks, and slowly word spread about my little retreat. People loved the quiet atmosphere, the clean, pesticide-free produce, the fresh eggs. Over time, my small business gained a reputation and more visitors came. On Thanksgiving Day, I was going over the accounts in the farmhouse when someone recognized me. A young woman approached hesitantly. "Excuse me, ma'am," she whispered as if sharing a secret. "Are you that brave divorced grandma?" There was a glimmer of curiosity and admiration in her eyes. It took me a moment to register what she meant, but when I did, I smiled and nodded. She lit up. She was one of Albert's former students, and a former fan of Kristen's books. She admitted that after the scandal broke, she had felt utterly disillusioned, unsure of which so-called intellectuals could still be trusted. "But when I heard about your story," she continued, "I felt inspired. You proved that even at 70 you can start a new life. We all think you're incredibly brave." Through her, I learned about what had become of Albert and Kristen. The fallout had been immense. The scandal hadn't just faded, it had left a permanent stain. Albert, who had been working at his old university under a special contract after retirement, was terminated without ceremony. The school quietly removed his portrait from their walls, erasing his legacy. Kristen's books were all pulled from shelves. Lisa had planned to use Kristen's reputation to climb the social ladder, secure a better job and elevate her status. But now, that dream had crumbled before her eyes. Without Kristen's influence, she had nothing left to leverage. And in the end, her resentment toward Kristen grew even harsher than the disdain she once held for me. As the months passed, Lisa's life began to unravel. The social circle she had tried so hard to climb into, using Kristen's name as a ladder, soon saw through her intentions. Her ambition, once masked as admiration for Kristen, turned into bitterness and disdain as her own plans crumbled. Lisa's once hopeful career path now seemed blocked. The scandals surrounding her family only made her more of an outcast. Attempts to land a new job were met with cold rejections. And with her strained relationship with both Kristen and Albert, her status continued to dwindle. The higher she aimed, the further she fell. One evening, Lisa called me, her voice tense, the words barely more than a whisper. "Mom, I messed up. I've lost everything." I didn't answer right away. There was no satisfaction in hearing her confess, only a quiet recognition that she had finally faced the consequences of her choices. "I told you," I replied softly, "you can't climb on the backs of others to get ahead. What you wanted was to take from others, but in the end, it's only left you with nothing." She didn't respond, the silence on the other end thick with regret. I knew there was nothing more I could say to her. She had to face the consequences of her own actions now. As for me, life had begun to feel more like I had imagined in my youth. The quiet, peaceful days in my countryside retreat were a far cry from the suffocating years I had spent chasing approval and acceptance from people who never truly valued me. I had built a life that was mine, free from manipulation, from betrayal, from the weight of unspoken expectations. I spent my days growing the farm, experimenting with new recipes for the restaurant, and occasionally meeting other women who, like me, had reinvented themselves later in life. The satisfaction of seeing my hard work flourish was more fulfilling than any status or recognition I'd ever sought. I realized that happiness wasn't about proving others wrong or seeking revenge. It was about creating a space where I could truly be myself. Looking back, I had paid a steep price for the lessons I'd learned. But I'd never felt more at peace with who I was and the life I'd built. As I stood on the porch one evening watching the sun dip behind the hills, I knew that this was the start of something better. Something all my own. And that was enough.